Ross needs an auditor who knows the industry as well as he does. For Brian, it's whether he can call the partner at midnight.
So?
They both came up with the same name, BDO.
Huh.
People who know BDO.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special edition of On the Money. My dinner with the innovators of the new economy.
Well done, sir.
Economy. That is the shared economy.
To the shared economy.
People inventing new companies that are fast becoming household names. They'll help you hail a cab, plan a party, or go on vacation.
Everyone deserves a Cinderella experience.
How they're changing the economy, your money, and your life. We'll feast on their ideas that have become reality and give you a seat at the table. To the new economy. All that and a lot more coming up now on The Money.
This is America's #1 financial news program, On the Money. Now, Maria Bartiromo.
We'll have our special program in just a few minutes, but first, a look at what's making news as we head into a new week on The Money. The nation's economy showed some signs of strength in the first quarter of the year. The gross domestic product report came out. It grew at an annualized rate of 2.5%. Now, that was below economists' expectations. They were expecting 3%, but it's still a rebound from last quarter's weak 0.4% showing. Consumer spending, a key component of the GDP, was at the best level since the end of 2010. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ rode a 5-day winning streak into Thursday, while the Dow's 3-day winning streak was broken earlier in the week. The markets were mixed on Friday. A big week for earnings among Dow components. Caterpillar missed expectations. The company also cut its outlook. Procter & Gamble missed as well, while Boeing and ExxonMobil beat expectations. In the technology world, Apple beat estimates and announced a share buyback, but it also said its growth rate had slowed. Netflix blew out expectations, and Amazon beat as well, although revenue was weak at Amazon. A short-lived plunge for stocks on Tuesday after a fake tweet from the Associated Press, which said there had been explosions at the White House. All three major indexes plummeted after that tweet came out, but they quickly recovered when it was disclosed that AP's account had actually been hacked. No word yet on who's responsible. A strong week for the markets and some key economic news, but how much attention should we pay to the GDP report? Joining me now is John Riding. He's chief economist and founder of RDQ Economics. John, always nice to have you on the program.
It's good to be here.
So we got the GDP report out on Friday, the broadest measure on size of the U.S. economy. It grew at an annualized rate of 2.5%, which was below expectations. What does it tell you?
Well, first of all, it tells us the economy continues to expand. And it was below expectations because we had another massive cut in government defense spending. So if you take that aside and look at the private side of the economy, that expanded at 3.3%, so a better growth rate there. So it tells us, despite the fears coming into the year, the fiscal cliff, despite the sequester, despite all this stuff, the economy continues to grow. And at a rate that people in Europe, even in the UK, which expanded in the first quarter, would kill for.
What about earnings? What does that tell us? We've had a mixed earnings period so far. Some of the large multinational companies, those companies that are seeing growth around the world, not just the United States, are missing expectations.
Well, and there are troubles in the global economy, and Europe remains in recession, the Eurozone area and the peripheral Eurozone area in particular. But, I don't look at individual companies from an earnings perspective. We look at the macro numbers, and our thesis coming into, even into last year, was if you look where margins are pretty much at a record high level for the economy as a whole. So we're not going to get rapid bottom line growth in earnings because really the margins, the economy couldn't expand much wider. So we were going to see slower earnings growth. I think what's driving this market, therefore, is the fact that the economy expands, and while earnings growth is modest, multiples are relatively low by historical standards compared to where interest rates are. And so it's that really, I think, has propelled the market.
So you think this market rally continues?
Well, our view coming into the year was the S&P would be somewhere around about 1550 by the end of the year. We're in the second quarter, and we're already above those levels. I do think we have to mark some time, and we're not going to see the rest of the year grow like we've seen the first quarter, in fact, the first 4 months of the year expand. But nevertheless, if you look at corporate bonds, and you turn a corporate bond into a multiple, it's selling at 22 times, on average, 22 times the coupon. where stocks are selling about 15 times earnings. And it really is that gap. And the question is, how much of that gap are we going to close? I don't think we close all of it because the Fed's holding interest rates down. And at some point in the future, it's not going to be able to hold interest rates down. The good news there, though, I think there's some cushion in the market for when that adjustment takes place. But you're right, it's not happening at the FOMC meeting next week.
So what should the retail investor be doing right now? Do you think it's too late to get into the market here? Would you put money into equities?
I think it's impossible to time this market, and that the average investor should be sticking with their long-term goals and their long-term plans. I think there's much more danger in the bond market for the longer term, especially in treasuries. I think these yields are too low.
All right, we will leave it there. John, always nice to have you on the
Thank you.
program. Thank you so much. John Riding joining us. Up next on this special edition of On the Money, I invited some of the biggest names in technology to dinner. Who got a seat at the table?
These entrepreneurs, they weren't around just a few years ago.
Right.
They're young, and they're creating billions of dollars of value in our economy.
As we take a break, take a look at how the stock market ended the week. Back in a moment. We're doing something a little different this weekend on The Money, giving you an intimate look at the fast-growing trend of disownership. That's consumers choosing to rent, borrow, lease goods and services rather than outright buying those goods and services. It's a revolution of innovation, consumption, and collaboration, and it's coming to dinner. For something called the sharing economy, there's no better place to discuss it than over a meal. By the way, everybody start eating. We brought together the rising stars of collaborative consumption, a new breed of technology companies that give consumers access to almost any product or experience without having to own it.
There's something really special about the collaborative consumption space. These are problem solvers.
What if you could book someone's home anywhere around the world the way you could book a hotel?
Joe Jebbia and Brian Chesky founded peer-to-peer travel site Airbnb, allowing homeowners to make money hosting guests.
There's actually 250 million cars across the country that sit idle 22 hours a day.
Jessica Scorpio's car-sharing service GetAround helps car owners rent out their vehicles when they'd otherwise be in the driveway.
Push a button, Mercedes rolls up.
How are you? How are you?
If you require something faster, Uber offers private cars on demand to city dwellers.
Everyone deserves a Cinderella experience.
Jennifer Hyman's designer dress may cost several $100s, but on Rent the Runway, she and her 3 million users can rent to wear at far less expense.
We built Kitchit with the idea that chefs are the rock stars, they're the artists.
The artist at this 4-course meal from private dining site Kitchit is Chef Dan Kluger of Manhattan restaurant ABC Kitchen. Weekend. One dinner party, several $100 million at stake.
These entrepreneurs are creating businesses that not only employ, but they create opportunity for others.
And it's opening up a world to folks that otherwise or earlier did not have access to that world. A private chef from Kitchit, designer clothing from Rent a Runway, a black car from Uber.
In many ways, trust is the new currency of this economy.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. Trust is the new currency of the new economy.
Absolutely is. And it used to be that buyers were anonymous and sellers were standardized. And the sellers were these like kind of older merchants, and now anybody can be an entrepreneur.
Since Airbnb launched in 2008, more than 10 million rooms have been rented peer-to-peer in 192 countries. The site has raised nearly $200 million in venture capital with the help of investors who understand that lower-cost opportunity to upper-class experience is revolutionizing consumer behavior.
It's experiences over materials. Experiences over materials. It's stories over stores.
When I get a bonus at work, I go and I take a vacation. I create a memory for myself. I have an experience in my life. And It's very different than 30 years ago. Consumption has changed in that way. And I think that all of these businesses are in the business of giving someone their own Cinderella moment.
In every one of these cases, there's a choice in a benefit in economics, a benefit in access, a benefit in quality, that they get to experience something that they couldn't have experienced before. I mean, it's a fundamentally advantaged, every business around here gives access to something they couldn't get access to before, typically at prices that they wouldn't be able to get access at.
And there's something else here, riffing off of what Jen just said, which is this notion of authenticity. Everyday, ordinary people, whether it's a dress or a home or even a personal experience in your kitchen from a chef.
Right.
It's about personal, authentic experiences.
Often these businesses and sometimes these entrepreneurs are portrayed as disruptors. In many ways, you're empowering individual consumers to get what they want, and you're empowering human beings to be able to create jobs. And I think it's so positive sum that it's not a zero-sum thing. And to suggest there's a zero-sum mindset, I think is inaccurate.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's exactly that. These companies are on the table, and these entrepreneurs, they weren't around just a few years ago.
Right.
They're young, and they're creating billions of dollars of value in our economy in a matter of a couple years.
Uber is growing at more than 20% month over month, connecting drivers with potential passengers in 30 cities. CEO Travis Kalanick says each new town is profitable in a year.
Our motto is everyone's private driver. So if you had your own private driver, which some people at this table may have, you would just get out of the car when you wanted to get out. There's like no vouchers, there's no cash, you just get out of the car.
Right.
You know, this is about collaborative consumption. I think it's about time we start consuming some wine. Travis,
Yes.
We got Syrah or Cabernet?
Up next, we're on the money and looking ahead, how learning to share may teach us a few other things. We're not going to be using laptops in a few years.
A lot less.
What's mine is yours. That's the message of the sharing economy. It's a growing business movement breaking down barriers between people, like the peer-to-peer marketplaces Airbnb for homes and Getaround for cars, and barriers to access. At any class, you can live rich thanks to startups like private car company Uber, Rent the Runway, dubbed the Netflix of clothes, and Kitchen, offering at-home dinners prepared by restaurant chefs. For these investors and innovators, a more connected economy is built by technology and trust.
You pour your wine and you
What was the advice that you just blew off? And you said, I'm going to move forward on this.
No one will ever do this.
Yeah, this is crazy. No one will ever do that.
I think that, the day after I had the idea for Rent the Runway, I called the top designer in the US and I positioned myself as the co-founder and CEO of Rent the Runway. It was 1 day old at the time, and I told her this crazy idea that I had to rent current season inventory. And she literally told me that not only was this never going to happen, but that I was going to ruin her business, destroy her brand, and she'd make sure every designer out there never rented their apparel.
That had to be scary.
I continued to probe her with questions as to what was she so scared of, what were the problems in her business, and how could I actually be helpful to her. She said to me, well, if you can create a business that introduces the next generation of women to my products, then not only would I work with you, but I'd scream from the windows how awesome it was. It's actually the same concept that the car industry has had for years. You would never think about buying a car unless you took it on a test drive. Well, why do we think about buying a $3,000 dress unless we take it for a test drive?
I know some of the founders here tonight, but not all. But when I talk to them, they don't talk about their press clippings. They don't talk about their growth rates. They talk about the values and principles of their company and what it is they're trying to create.
They don't talk about page views, they don't talk about visitations. Everyone is a transaction business. And in transaction businesses, the metrics is really clear. It's either growing or it's not growing. I graphed eBay's revenue growth against Airbnb's revenue growth. And it was virtually, over the first 3 years, eBay's done it for another 12, they were virtually identical.
You're kidding.
And so when you're starting to say, okay, Airbnb has the potential to become an eBay, you get, incredibly excited about the scope of what is possible.
Is there something that's not out there that you're looking for that you wish technology was able to do?
One route technology can do is to dehumanize things, to automate. You buy something and a machine picks, packs, and ships it. Everything is an algorithm. Another view of the world is that technology is actually enabling tighter, more personalized human connection. And that's what person-to-person connection, not company-to-person, person-to-person.
I call it the algorithm of the heart. Getting people to these experiences designed to be so simple that a push of a button can get you magically a car in minutes. And when that happens, we forget that the technology even exists.
Where do you spend most of your time online, Sherman?
But for me, it's all mobile. What I was going to say is, like, I don't use my laptop anymore. It's like...
Neither do I.
It's a rotary phone at this point.
I just stopped using a laptop. I just stopped using a laptop to even run the company, so that I can run the company off an iPad and iPhone.
We're not going to be using laptops in a few years.
A lot less.
John, let me get your take. How does things look different in 5 years?
Well, I would say that it has nothing to do with business, but it has to do with our world. And we grew up in a world where a Russian was someone we never met as a kid, or a Chinese person, or feared. And what these companies and technology is now doing is enabling our kids and our kids' kids to connect as human to human.
Absolutely.
And it's making the world smaller in a really healthy way. And hopefully it will reduce the polarity we've got in the U.S. political system, which is just mind-numbingly frustrating right now.
Very much.
And then in the world, it can reduce the polarity that has developed and make the world a more connected place. And
I have a story that's going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
Leave some of that mind.
Yeah.
Have some ice cream. This story starts in Berlin at the height of the Cold War in the 1960s. And there's a gentleman named Jorg who knows what that atmosphere was like better than probably any of us. And he left, this guy Jorg left in 1979 before the reunification. Recently, as in like this year, his daughter convinces him to go back to Germany for the first time in decades. So she books an Airbnb listing in Berlin. They show up to get the keys from a host named Kai, and the two men start talking. And they realize that they both had the same job. They were both border guards in Germany in the 60s. Jorg was a border guard on the west side of the wall, and Kai was a border guard on the east side of the wall. And these two men would often stare into each other's eyes across the Berlin Wall. And here they are sitting side by side in an Airbnb living room, closer than they ever had, with this air of reconciliation around them.
Wow.
That is the shared...
You're a part of history.
Well done, sir. Economy.
Cheers.
That is the
Connected
shared
economy.
economy.
This is a shared economy.
You've been given a seat at the table of the so-called sharing economy. Now here's someone who helped put that table together. Joining me right now is Dan Rosenzweig. He's CEO of Chegg, an education learning platform for college students. Dan, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
You bet. Hey, Maria, how are you?
You know, it was so much fun putting that roundtable together, and thank you so much for the help on that, because I really think it brought this story to life. What do you think the story is that needed to be told by the people at that table?
Yeah, I think it's probably three things. First of all, that there is this economy that is actually influencing the broader economy, and people aren't even aware of it. When you consider how many people are using it, how much revenue is flowing through it, how many new people are getting jobs as a result of it, that it's not only big now, but it's just going to get bigger, and it's sustainable because so many people can participate and benefit from it. I think that's probably the most important thing. The second thing that I think was interesting, even for me at the dinner, and I've known these guys for a long time, is that, you know, they don't see themselves as in this for the short haul. They see themselves as 100-year companies where they actually think that they're changing the dynamics of industries, and they're allowing a lot more people to participate, and they have great passion for it. And I think that was pretty amazing. And the third thing is just how young these people are, that, you know, they are digital natives rather than digital immigrants, and they just see the world through this lens.
Now, talk to us about Chegg, because you know your company provides textbooks for rent to students. online homework help. Why do you think this change is coming about? And I love the idea of textbooks because they're big, they're heavy, they're expensive. Why would I want to own that rather than rent it?
Well, you've never wanted to own it. I would think the biggest thing that's probably changed in my 15 or 20 years around the internet space is the definition of who the customer is. In every one of the companies that you had for dinner, all of them, their real change, their real disruption is they're focusing on the actual user of the product. So in education, the institutions were set up to sell the textbooks to the professors, not the students. The wholesaler made money, the bookstore made money. The professor didn't even care what the price of the textbook was. And here were students required to buy something that they weren't going to keep, that they didn't want to have, and they were paying a fortune for it. And so if we can give them close to 70 or 80% off, they don't want it, they rent it, they use it, and they send it back. And so this is, this is about using excess capacity, which of textbooks there are, to be able to bring the prices down, get the user to get a better experience, and allow more people to participate in education.
Very exciting. Dan, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much.
All right, Maria, thank you.
We'll see you soon. Dan Rosenzweig joining us from Chegg. Finally, let's take a look at the stories coming up in the week ahead that may move the markets and impact your money this week. It's another heavy week for earnings. We will hear from Pfizer, Facebook, Visa, General Motors, and AIG, among others. Tuesday kicks off the FOMC's two-day meeting. Wednesday, we've got auto sales data. Also on Wednesday, furloughs will hit the West Wing. White House employees are required to take one day off or a pay cut. And then on Friday, the monthly jobs report for the month of April will come out. It is always a market mover. That'll do it for us for today. Thank you so much for being with me. Each week, keep it right here where we are on the money. See you next weekend.
Ross needs an auditor who knows the industry as well as he does. For Brian, it's whether he can call the partner at midnight.
So?
They both came up with the same name, BDO.
Huh.
People who know BDO.